Thank you. Wow. Boy. What a stretch. Yes. Now, yeah. Not bad. Not bad. If you all are not aware, let me remind you that Frank has actually given us a way to get to what Henry VI is in a sense responsible for, and that, of course, is the Cambridge University College Choir performances at Christmas. And it's very nice if you want to go that way. You can get them on NPR, of course, every year. But the choir of King's College is quite good, and the performances are absolutely amazing. So that may be something you're interested in, and we very indebted that Frank provided that for us. The Wars of the Roses, and they are called that because, well, some of us wasted our money seeing the movie. Yes, do you remember that? I thought, I paid to go in, so I'm not buying popcorn, but I'm going to stay until it's over, since I wasted the movie ticket money. The idea, of course, is that it wasn't really a war, so called. Actually, this term comes from Shakespearean times, when he is, of course, trying to indicate the glories of unity and let's all be together, and it's all about Tudor love, which is a matter of opinion, but that is the idea of the roses. And some of you have probably read this in Shakespearean plays when the two roses are brought together. But let's start with some arbor talk. And of course, I've got to do the family tree of the Yorkists. And I hope many of you could see this. And those darn Mortimers, they're going to be there. See them? Every line you're going to have one or more. That is the Mortimers. And those Nevilles, they come in. Oh, yeah, see the Nevilles? We'll see them. And then I want you to be sure and notice we've got an Italian there. Yeah. And you say, what's an Italian doing over there in the Yorkists? I think it's spelled Lira. Yes, the filth of lots of those. The Visconti, the ruling family of Milan, would arrange this because we need cash and we need it fast. And the Visconti can provide it. It's all about love, all about I will love you forever. No, not so much, but the Visconti now could be, as you see, a major figure. I thought that was fascinating to see a Visconti in that particular line. But then you get into the complexities and you think, gosh, I'm glad we're not going to have an exam on tracing the Yorkists. But it does appear, you see how it goes in down that way. And then finally there's Cecily Neville, married to Richard, Duke of York. And that finally gets us to our Edward IV. We don't need to go any further than that. But you see, in all of the complexities of marriage and genealogy and all the rest, you'll see the various families who help contribute to this line. and made it possible, of course, that they could claim they were from the line of Edward III. And you say, yeah, but so were the Lancastrians. Yeah, but we have more than you do. We have two sides, and we were earlier than you were. It's very, very unfortunate that they couldn't reach some sort of settlement and say, you have it, and then we'll take it, or we can share, or something of the sort. But the Yorkists, under Richard, were determined to get under it and participate, because remember, we are in the reign of Henry VI, as some of you who did not skip class last time, not naming names, but you will understand it was a difficult time for Henry VI and his following, because let's face it, the Duke of York had position. It was as if to say, we want to help Cousin Henry, and we kind of have a right to help you. Remember, Henry VI has some problems. So there are other kinds of people, as we know, who are going to try to get their 2 cents in. And that's what will create all kinds of interesting dynamics in this situation. It's ambition, it's territory, it's, of course, almost boredom, because it's not like you're out there hoeing and picking in the field and you can think, wow, I'd love to have a war. This would be so exciting. I just don't think if you had gone around and done a peasant poll, and said, if Gallup had been around back then and said how many people are pro-war or ratemywar.com, I just don't think that this is violent. This is really a war of the upper classes. Have you ever thought about that? I mean, it's really true in this case. And we'll see that, I think, during this period. I love this map because we see all the sites of the battles. And when I refer back to them, I just thought I would have it there, because we all know Bosworth, Lord knows. You learned that in school, and it's in the novels. All the novels. Who could not know about Bosworth and read a Tudor book, right? Yeah. Or a Tudor series on what, Showtime, HBO, whatever those various channels are. Yeah. Everybody's got Bosworth Field. And believe me, they know it. You can get T-shirts, mugs, all kinds of paraphernalia if you have that kind of money to throw around. Yeah. Which I'm happy for you. But understand, the rest of us will have to do without. But that's them. But really, as we're going to see by the end of this next time, we will see some of these places are amazing. I did not know until I was working on all this how much these are tourist sites. And I should have figured out they would be, that they would be on the list of places you could get, your shirts or your mugs or whatever it is, because, there's a pound somewhere to be had, making the money and going to those tourist sites. And all of these places that you see Tewkesbury, as the British say, St. Albans, and up there, Wakefield and Towton. All of these places, if people are interested in that, and all the Americans and Canadians, I suppose, are flocking to that. I don't know about the British, but we make up for it with the Anglophilia among most of us. Can't get enough. insatiable, right? So all of this becomes very important when we think about the tourism industry in Britain. Yeah, they want to see the Downton Abbey. Have you all seen the movie yet? Yeah. Guess it's still on. Yeah. And it was nice. But all of that would demonstrate, I think, the interest. But I was very surprised that there was such an interest in the Wars of the Roses, because after that cheesy movie, that basically, it's like taking the name of the war in vain. It's sad. I found it, well, just unsatisfactory.
They just remade it, you know.
Oh
It went from the
God,
80s. They just
no.
remade it, yeah. You need to see the new one. I haven't seen it.
Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, I'll start popping. Yeah, no butter, but yeah, I'll pop. Yeah, for $5-10, I guess. Yeah. But anyway, I just thought that was interesting to show you these various sites and how interesting it is to make you aware of them and understand. You could probably do, I am far from a tourism expert, but do a Wars of the Roses tour. Oh, yeah.
I'm sure there is.
Oh, yeah. And full of British food. Or maybe they wouldn't do that to you. Maybe for something good Italians. Yeah. Yeah. Something with cuisine. It provided for Visconti.
Toe in the hole.
I'm sorry.
Who doesn't love toe in the hole?
Oh, well, yeah, there are many appetizing things. Now, here is that's what it's all about. The white rose of the Yorkists and the red rose of the Lancastrians. And you see, Big T, Tudor. That's what it means. We are talking ecumenical here. It's all about love. Yeah. And peace and joy. I mean, it's a nice concept. And again, this is Shakespearean idea. And I guess the Tudor government, somebody or other, must have been providing some support, resources for Shakespeare to get all of this. But it's interesting, as you remember that scene very early. I think it's in Henry VI, or maybe one of the others. But anyway, that's the idea. But were this term used actually during the events, I'm not so sure. But it's obviously something historians like, because it brings it all together in a neat package. The Wars of the Roses. And then you stop and ask yourselves, I wonder if folks really thought that way. Probably not then. I don't think they were too worried about that. They were just worried about winning, right? And sadly, trying to kill each other. So that is the idea of the Wars of the Roses. Oh, yes. Now, I sat there thinking, how many causes could I think of? I'm sure I missed some, but I think this is enough. Again, it's not like people like John Ball and Watt Tyler are saying, we would love to have another war. We want to do what we can to attack. Well, look at number 2. I love that one. Many of you will remember when I say 1453. And if you don't, I'll be sad, but I can deal with it. The pain of not remembering the fall of Constantinople to the Turks. But it was also the fall of Bordeaux to the French. Wine, yeah, we love wine, good wine. Bordeaux's a lovely city down near Spain. In any event, what happens after the fall of Bordeaux? Well, we have Calais. We're so thankful to have Calais. We'll keep that another century. But what if you had been fighting for the English side during the years before 1453? Are you asking yourself that existential question? What's my purpose? What's it all about for you? And you think, well, maybe I can get my military retirement and then I can just kick back and maybe work with the peasants and do some plowing. No, 1,000 times no. You're bored. You want to fight. I honestly believe that the end of the 100 Years' War, yeah, it's depressing. We lost. It's always hard to lose. We all understand that as Auburn fans. Sometimes we lose, but we come back. Our spirits are still strong. So I'm thinking, more or less, these English forces needed something to do. And again, we have to remember this whole class of people. They're about fighting. They're not like, maybe I could join the church and I could be a clergyman. Or I could do something, or I could go into scholarship and do a PhD. No, not our calling. This is, those of you who may have had careers in career guidance and that kind of thing, well, understand they knew where they were going. They were going to the battlefield, getting on horses and hurting people and and not too squeamish, we could say. So all of that, obviously, Lancastrian and Yorkist, who's going to have the power. So just to be aware, I got so excited about number 2, I couldn't wait. But number 1 is clearly the fact that they both have claims. I told some of you back in, I guess, the spring of 25, Edward just had too many boys. Yeah. And they just too fertile. I mean, it's nice to be fertile. I'm not knocking fertility. I'm just saying sometimes, and they can, and girls can be very helpful, because of marriages and dowries and that kind of thing. But the problems of the boys. So that's 2. 3, these private armies. I put that in quotation marks because some of you will remember when I talked about it's not private in the sense of like, if I wanted to go around and invade the ROTC program and start bringing people in under Kicklighter command or something like that. This is more like John of Gaunt. Remember him? And other people like that. They had their own military forces, which had nothing to do with being what we call English Royal Army. That was their army. And I'm sure they had, well, we saw the lands of the Lancaster family, so they had plenty of resources, so they were doing fine. So that's the idea, these private armies. Frank, have you ever come across this, the idea of these various noble families having their own force?
Oh, yeah, sure, absolutely.
Yeah. So
but they own fealty theoretically to the.
Oh, yeah, but that's pretty much. They'd even gotten into what was called bastard feudalism, the idea. It doesn't, it's just play feudalism. It's not serious. It's But the armies that were commanded by these nobles could be very, very powerful, and they didn't necessarily have the best interests of the crown. They had the interests of the duke, or, well, I guess whoever's paying. Falworth, oh, a blessed event. I know, brings a tear. That, of course, is the Prince of Wales. And you're going to say, but there were so many princes of Wales. Yes, there have been quite a few, haven't there? All started, sadly for the Welsh, with Edward II in the 13th century. So this particular Prince of Wales would be the alleged son of Henry VI and Margaret of Anjou. I don't know, for those of you who studied this period, and do you realize this whole course is about the 16th century? Yeah, I'm not even going to get into, I mean, it's all just one century. So basically, what I'm saying is that this child was supposed to be the long sought child of Henry VI and his very young wife, Margaret of Anjou, because they needed that for the obvious reason of continuing the line. And you couldn't say, well, Henry VI has growing mental issues. Is that going to be a problem? No. As long as he can help reproduce, then that'll work out nicely. Again, there may have been talk even that time if Margaret of Anjou had involvement, but I guess that's not surprising. In any event, there's a little boy. Name was Edward. That won't be on the file. But it's like Henry, and then an Edward. And you'll think, well, that must have brought father and son close. Maybe they could go do things together, go fighting or sword practice. I don't know, but that's not the way it was. Obviously, Henry VI's issues were becoming increasingly bad. Like his grandfather, Charles VI, he would have these, shall we say, episodes until finally there was just nothing, just going to be the mental challenges. So Edward VI has a strong mother, as we all know, in Margaret of Anjou. She was a young mother, very young. So once she had that child, she was a very serious mother. Boy, if they had, like in my generation, they'd had Dr. Spock back then, I'm sure Margaret of Anjou could quote it by verse, and like, Dr. Spock was a famous baby doctor. And I have to say to you young people, I just want to make sure I don't want to talk about things from the past that I don't, but not something on Star Trek. So don't do that.
That's Mr. Spock.
That would hurt me. Okay. Thank you, Trivia King. But Dr. Benjamin Spock was considered the authority on baby rearing. And I know, boys. So all of this is to say that Margaret became quite involved, and they always make a big deal in books on this period because normally we think of her as this big politico and somebody involved, but not so much. She just got that way later. Because, of course, her husband didn't seem like exactly what you would dream about, like if you were Guinevere and King Arthur and all that. I mean, yeah, but I've got the kid, Junior. So I've got to do something to save it for him because we don't want to go on, retirement, golden parachute. No. Want to have a son who's a king. Little Eddie. Yeah. So that's going to be very interesting to me. Number 6. And that always tiring phrase, the she-wolf from France, which will become very popular. I wish I knew, and again, I don't know enough trivia to know, people who played the role of Margaret of Anjou. Janet, you may know more about people who played it on those television series, but I know nothing about that. And if anybody did it in Hollywood, I feel like I know it's silver screen types, but maybe I can check with Turner Classic Movies. Maybe they can help me with that. But yeah, Margaret of Anjou is a fascinating individual, and it's very interesting that we know as much about her as we do. And she is a participant in the Wars of the Roses, sometimes in person, which is unbelievable to think about being a female in that day and age and yet being so involved with warfare. And who is the rival? Richard, Duke of York. He gets his own slide. That was my way of saying he's a big deal. And I think sometimes he gets overlooked because he's not going to be with us long, which is an unfortunate reality in military history. Some of these folks, don't make it to the next round. Now, Richard, Duke of York, is the head of the Yorkist family. All too well known to his cousin Margaret. I use that term cousin advisedly. They weren't friends. Because, of course, he wanted basically to run Henry's government. And you say, is that right? Well, I mean, he is very close to the king. He's a cousin of the king. He's a Yorkist. He's got lots and lots of lands. Henry is not particularly well. And so we need somebody in charge. I'm sure Margaret of Anjou would like to have stepped out and said, we can take care of it. Thanks, but no thanks. But I'm not sure Richard, Duke of York, was willing to bow out. More aggressive, persistent, and I'm not sure they had a good relationship. It's like we live in a more genteel world, but they were they were pretty hateful. I don't think Margaret and Richard liked each other at all because, of course, she viewed him rightly as a threat to her husband's authority. So basically, he'll become the catalyst because, again, we have to remember Henry VI's mental fade outs. Boy, oh boy, this is the first battle of St. Albans, fought way down south, 1455. And what's significant about this is I think that Margaret, and I'm thinking possibly the real father of the heir to the throne, who was the Duke of Somerset. Now, who was the Duke of Somerset? Oh, you're gonna find out. This is gonna be exciting. He was one of those Beauforts. These folks come around. If you watch the stories, Days of Our Lives, or any of that, this is like one of the stories out of that, because you remember the Beauforts. I mean, Edward III's paramour, Catherine Swynford, comes from that line. So, of course, Beaufort line would lead to Somerset, and I'm sure he had a nice title and he had a wife and children and all that. But some people say he had so much influence and such a major role to play in all of these. And Henry VI doesn't strike people as exactly the paramour that maybe Margaret was looking for, to be the father of her child. Whatever the case, Somerset is the male in this opposition to the Duke of York. And we also say sad farewell to the Duke of Somerset in 455. Obviously, I'm cutting this back, but you understand that in the years before 455, Somerset had been buzzing around the Queen. And remember, Somerset is a royal cousin of sorts. So it's not like he's some sort of stranger. I mean, he's got all kinds of connections and all the rest of it. So all of this is just a theory. Didn't have any DNA tests back then, so we will never know. But anyway, he did. So it was very nice. So the first Battle of St. Albans, which they always talk about being so bloody. And again, I don't know what you mean by a nice war, a peaceful battle, and everybody hug later. Yeah, I don't. It's not like they're athletes or anything of the sort. So basically, Somerset's out of the way, and the Queen is going to have to deal with the fait accompli that without Somerset to say, I'll lead the government on behalf of the king. Richard, Duke of York, is going to take over. And boy, Margaret didn't like it. Could you imagine having cabinet meetings? I mean, you know, it's like some of you remember the first time when presidents' wives would come to cabinet meetings, and I think it's a little different with Margaret of Anjou, because with her husband, like he was, she would basically spelling out the royal will. And now Duke of York comes in and says, well, you know, I'm really in charge of the government. And she doesn't appreciate that too much. But, and it goes fast, 1455 to 1460, you'll notice. And for some of us, 5 years is nothing. I mean, it's a very short period, but it's time enough for bad feelings to develop and harden. Because Richard, Duke of York, wants more power. And you will not be surprised when I say I think he wanted to be king. I don't know what he thought he was going to do about little Eddie, who's getting to be big Eddie, because puberty is coming, teenage. So there's always, as the years go by, a coming to terms with a very, very unpleasant situation. I can't imagine sitting in the meetings between the king, the queen, and the various ministers led by the Duke of York. And of course, this means going to Parliament. So they were in on this too. So notice how I put this. They coalesced in size and hatred. You say, what is it? The old sonnet, how much do I love thee? I think this is how much do I hate thee, living count the ways. I'm thinking, yeah, I mean, it's like the Yorkists and Lancastrians, I think, are growing. You think, can't we all love each other? Peace? No. And it gets worse. 56, 57 years, 58, and just gets worse and worse. And think, but how is this going to affect the masses of people? I don't think don't worry. We are not worried about that. We just worried about how much we hate each other. And that's the truth. And they have demonstrated it repeatedly. But that starts in this period of 1455. And then there's Wakefield in Dalton. This series of battles in 1460, 61 will bring about a definitive turn in these Wars of the Roses. Let me note, first of all, that the Duke of York, that's Richard, Duke of York, is going to die. But before you come say it, he got a son. And that son is ready to go. Oh, Dad, I'll miss you, but you trained me well. His name was Edward. Got a lot of Edwards. Yeah, popular name. So basically then, and guess who is still around? Henry VI. Yeah, he's doing fine. Thank you very much. Well, not mentally, but physically, he seems to be hanging in. But Richard, Duke of York, is dead. His son, Edward, takes over. But around the corner is going to be someone of great importance. I have a lot to say about him, the Earl of Warwick. And by the way, if you haven't been to Warwick Castle, you might want to do that. Even online, it's very interesting and beautiful. And they have, it's a who's who of prisons. I mean, God, yeah, not in the sense of a good one. It's not the penal institution I want to go to. If I have to go. I don't think first class accommodations, no. But Warwick Castle will have some very interesting people. And the Warwicks, you say, how did he get that title? Because his name, of course, a famous name, Richard Neville. And you say, gosh, I bet he's a biggie. You betcha. And you know what he did? He married the female heiress of the Warwick line. What does that make him? You got it. The Earl of Warwick. I found that fascinating. I'm sure there are many other cases of that sort, but basically he got the title through his wife. Because if you're like I am, most cases are through the husband. But I guess if there was not a male and the female, then you're some like, oh, honey, I love you so much. I've got roses, and chocolates, and that I'll write you a sonnet, and all of that. And she said, oh, you too, baby. Then he gets to be Earl. You say, is that fair? I don't think so, but that's the way it worked. So he is the Earl of Warwick with all the nice revenues and so forth that come with it. And he is a very powerful man. He has a private army. Oh, I'm going to use a modern term. I know you'll be shocked because I don't get off that much, but I hear so much about influencers. I know. Can I do that? I feel very excited
You
to do
are.
something so so 21st century. I mean, yeah, because I don't get out of the 20th a lot, but I'll do it just this once. I feel like he is so powerful. He's one of those, everybody goes to him and says, Dear Earl, I'm thinking of having a power coup. And I wondered what you thought about that. And you know how flattery and can go to some people's heads. And he already had plenty. Don't he's not out there saying, gosh, when is my next gig? It's not. I think he's doing fine. Thank you very much. Got a big marriage. He's very significant. He's a Neville after all, in addition to now having Warwick. But he likes to be Mr. Big Stuff. So he will basically, having been, I'd almost say a crony of Richard, Duke of York. Now with Richard dead, he's going to turn to the son. And Edward will say, Dad loved you so much. And I would be so happy if you would help me. Can you imagine? I mean, he probably got very excited. He said, well, yeah, young man, I'm here to serve, all that kind of build up. You and I, we're going to have great plans for you, for me, and for all people who follow our wonderful royal York line. So that's how it is going to play. In fact, these battles are going to lead to major concerns, including a new guest in the Hotel Tower of London. Who's going to check in? We've had so many special guests, but now hospitality is going to be extended to our troubled, shall I call him former king, King Emeritus? to borrow from academia. I don't want to be ugly about this, but yeah. You'll notice I put new king, so I mean, that would be hurtful if you were Lancastrian, but reality, that probably Henry is going to a lot of church services, and I don't know how much he was aware of. Happily, for Margaret and her son, who's probably almost a teenager by this point, they're able to escape. I think they go circuitous way to France through Wales and Scotland. I'm not sure how long this took, but the Yorkists didn't, the New Yorkist rulers didn't try to stop them. And somehow she got over to France with her son. And of course, she got in touch with her cousin, King Louis XI, who was glad to see her. I mean, I don't know if, it's like when people stay after the weekend and you're thinking, when are you leaving? It was like they were cousins, but he was probably said, England is probably really pretty. So, that kind of thing. And I worry about Henry. He may get a little cold or get stuff. But whatever the case, she's over there and she's very busy plotting. Of course, she wants to get her husband out because there's a new game in town. And that game is called Edward the Fourth. He is, for many of us, the new beginning of the royal dynasty, which will have a short life, the very end of the 15th century. But I guess you'd say he felt like his father had earned it and gave his life for it. And he didn't have too much interest in the issues of the Lancastrians. I'm sure of that. So that will be Edward the Fourth, and you can figure out where he got that name after Edward the who was his ancestor. What is he going to do with Henry? Well, I don't think he went by the tower and stuck his head in and said, I hope you're having a good day. Maybe I could bring you some more cereal, or what would you like for breakfast? Oh, yeah. Blood pudding, or the stuff that I got to eat in England. Awful. But yeah, blood pudding. Yeah. It's as bad as it sounds. Some of you all who are more open-minded probably like it, but so now I just want to go back and show you where these places are. And I think you can see St. Albans and how it all ends up with the Towton and Wakefield March of 1461. And that's when Margaret, her son, go on an extended trip to hang out with the in-laws, the family, the Valois family, and plot for another day. Another day when we're going to stage a comeback. But don't you think for a minute that Margaret, I don't know how much she was concerned about the poor husband in the Tower of London, but we kind of need him.
Huh.
I mean, yeah, because he is for Lancastrians everywhere, he is the titular king. Because, I mean, if you went around, I don't know if it'd be safe to go out in public during the 1460s and say, I really don't care for Edward the Fourth. I wish we had Henry VI back. I don't know. I think I'd be quiet. Because I think that could be troubling if you were to be a dissenter, unless you want to have a battle about it. But more or less, this is going to be a case of planning a comeback, and Margaret of Anjou is going to be in charge, along with her son. I think he is getting to the stage that he wants to help Margaret. That'd be interesting to know more about his role and all that, because obviously because she's so unique and because he is so young. You don't know as much about him as would be interesting to know. But anyway, I just wanted you to be aware of where some of these battles are, and we'll get to Tewksbury and Bosworth probably in the next round. But here he is, and he was supposed to be like a model. I don't know if this actually gives him a lot of credence, but that's supposedly what he was supposed to look like. But see what it says in quotation marks. Those are hurtful words, aren't they? You don't want anybody to say that about you, and I'm sure they would. Indolent and dissolute, yikes. But that doesn't give you a ratemyking.com. I mean, but these are safely, you can say things like that nowadays. But I'm not sure I would say that at the time, but that's the general consensus, which is kind of interesting. I mean, he was great as a military leader, like his dad. I mean, his dad would have been very proud of it. But once he became king, it was all about so many women, so little time, and drinking more than was good for him. You know what I mean? No moderation. And I think I'd like an extra tea. You know, it's like, would you like more broccoli? No. No. Speaking of something that's good for you, yeah, love me some broccoli. Yeah. So, but idea of Edward seems such a very, very weird idea to think of this successful young ruler. He went only to 40, which even in that time, but they usually made it to the old 50 if they did, you know, pretty well. But he just made it 40. Well heeled financially through the lost resources of the Lancastrians. Because remember, Margaret is in France. The king is locked up. Somerset, there's Darnell. And you're asking yourself, but what about other members of Somerset's family? Oh, they want somebody to get hurt. But I'd be real still right now, because that ain't going to work for you. And they will confiscate all this. It's not like, you know, this was bad, the fighting, but now let's be friends. Reach out and touch somebody's hand. That was a song. It was popular at one time. I just thought I'd point that out. But they didn't get back together. But Edward IV had a rather lengthy reign, and lots was going on in that reign having to do with the confiscation of Lancastrian goods, and of course, over in France, ex-Queen Margaret being very busy developing plans for returning. Let me say she got encouragement from cousin Louis XI. Again, I guess the French and the English, their war, their so-called 100 Years' War may be over, but I'm not sure that the animosity was ever going to end. And it certainly wasn't going to end at this period. So I'm sure that she was encouraged by the French monarchy to agitate as much as he could. She could. Of interest is to know that Edward IV actually had a relationship with, I think of one when I think of this, the Burgundians. Because you remember, Burgundy had been an ally of the English at times. So there's always that kind of stirring up, and Edward IV and his diplomats were working on that. But Edward IV had a lot going for him, even though he may have been a playboy. And, you don't want to criticize people's lifestyle, but when it affects the quality of your reign, that can be a problem. And that's where Neville comes in. Do you know what we call Neville? The kingmaker. That's why I like to call him a promoter, a sort of individual who will have all kinds of ways of, if he's on your side, he's really good for you. Now, those of you who know more about art than I do may find this interesting because it looks rather 17th century to me. I mean, the costume. But anyway, if you get close to it, you can see that Neville, who came from wealth and family, he wasn't a peasant boy who worked his way up. I can assure you, he had all the wonderful opportunities, and he was intelligent. He was militarily very capable, and he threw in his lot with the Yorkists. He was a primo advisor to Richard of York, commanded armies. I guess we would call him like West Point, top of the line in today's circles. But all of this means that he is a major player. But what happens? Hurt. Yeah, anger. The kingmaker expects for King Edward IV to basically say, I love you very much. And if this is your advice, what was that old song? You ain't heavy, you're my brother. That sort of thing. I love you, you're so great. And instead, the dissolute, indolent Edward is going to say, yeah, that's your opinion. I'm sorry that we have a difference of view. Incredibly shaken by this hurtful remark. I guess Richard Neville almost wants to go to a seminar in anger management. Yeah. Thinking like, how can he talk? I've done so much for her. I mean, you were a little fellow. I loved you. I taught you how to behead people. I taught you how to ram swords. And now you don't follow my advice. You know what I think I'll do? I think I'll go to France. I would guess back then they didn't think about going to the Riviera. Going to Nice and They play those gambling games sometimes. Yeah. Not that you would want to go to those places, but if you were rich and powerful, maybe that would be nice. I'm not sure what Neville was up to, but it's almost like take your toys and go home. Pouting because he was out of it. Because the king hadn't done what he wanted. And what was there? Marriage. Now you say, oh, how beautiful. Love is going to blossom. I don't know about that. This is not something out of Homer. This is something out of politics. Oh, and the big D. And you say, what is the big D? Oh, I thought you never asked. Dowry. Yeah. Political alliances and dowries. And you know what Edward had done? He fell in love. But he fell in love with somebody that this fellow did not approve of. So he said, I'm going to France, and you and this creature, I hope you like each other. Because now we're through. You say, that's a lot of hurt. You are very right. I mean, that's going to be the end of it. You say, did they ever meet? Did they ever have reconciliation? Was love ever restored between the king and the kingmaker? Well, I'm sorry to say, no. We'll pick it up there next time, though, and see where it goes. Thank you all very much for coming. Please come back. The roses will not grow stale. We'll keep them going and water them and look after them.
Okay.